We'll let a last few people trickle in here. Can you hear me? Is that better? Can you hear me now? Yes, thank you. How's that? Better? All right, it's kind of, you have to kind of lean forward. All right, so thank you all for coming out. My name is Ted Deers. I'm the Assistant Director of the Water Division at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And I want to thank St. Anselm's College for hosting us here, as well as the town of Goffstown for doing all the legwork to make this happen. I also want to introduce my colleagues from DES. I have Dan Mataney, who's our Chief of Operations, and I have Corey Clark, who you will hear from in a little bit, who's our Dam Bureau Administrator and the Chief Dam Engineer for the state. And when I say dam engineer, I mean engineer of dams, just so it's clear. He's a damn good one, too. So, again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. You hate to have a party and no one shows. Clearly, that wasn't the problem tonight. I also want to thank those out in TV land who are watching. This is also being broadcast, and thank you to Goffstown for making that happen. So we are here. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You're not here to listen to us. You're here to ask questions and for us to answer them. That's really the point of tonight. So just a couple of things to just get us started. The only decision that's been made so far, and we're here to, let's just put it out there what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the 3 dams that sit on the Piscataquog River between Goffstown and Manchester. So I think if that's why you're here, you're in the right place. And so we're going to be talking tonight about sort of the situation with those 3 dams and obviously the lakes that they impound and the good folks who live around them. So these are the topics for tonight, and we will endeavor to give you a quick presentation that kind of goes through the facts and figures. We're going to focus on that tonight. What are the facts and figures? What do we know? What don't we know? Where are we headed with this? Where do we see this going? And then really open it for you all to ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. So I like to be a bottom line up front person. That is, I want to tell you exactly where we are and what we've done to date as an agency and where it is that we're headed. To date, one decision has been made. The only decision that has been made is we have surrendered the FERC license on the Hadley Dam. That's the one in downtown Goffstown. So by doing that, it just means that we're not going to generate electricity there. We don't plan to generate electricity. And those of you who know the story, we had 16 years of not being able to find an operator. Yes?
First question. I know it, but maybe the audience, what's FERC?
So, sorry, FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and that's who regulates dams for hydroelectric power. Thank you for asking that question. So, we have surrendered that license, and the only other activity that we've engaged in is we are beginning to do design work on removal of the Hadley Dam, as we have been talking about now for many months. So the design work is starting to get going on that. Other than that, those are the 2 things that have happened. And I'll introduce my other colleague, Mark Sanborn, who's our Assistant Commissioner.
On time as always. See everyone.
And Mark will also help to answer questions here this evening, your questions here this evening. So those are the only 2 decisions that have truly been, or the only 2 actions that have been made, 1 decision and 1 sort of set of designs in process. Everything else, there have been no decisions made by the department. This is a work in progress, but there are a lot of issues that we do have to address as a department. And so that's really what we're going to do for the next few minutes, is have Corey Clark come up. There were some handouts. I hope we had enough. Probably not, but if you can share with a friend. That
we'll post online too.
And yes, we'll make sure we post online, and we'll give it to Goffstown to post on their website as well, and send it out to people who'd like it. So Corey's going to kind of go through that handout and talk a little bit more about the Dam Bureau. He's going to talk a little bit about the state of dams, the state of dams, and about the 276 dams that the state owns, as well as a little bit maybe about the other 2,000 or so that we regulate. He's going to go through each of the 3 structures and talk a little about what's going on with those, and then leave us with a little bit of kind of what happens next. You're going to hear, I think, some stuff that's hard to hear. You're going to hear some stuff that's really exciting. One of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about is that the Piscataquog River is truly special. It's truly special from fisheries perspective, and it's one of the things that is, I think, really interesting about the opportunities that we face here on the river is the restoration of fisheries within this river. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corey, unless, Mark, you have some words of wisdom for us.
No, nothing wise, but I have some words. I'm sure Ted did a great job covering everything that needs to be covered, but there's just one broad point I was hoping to make for the purposes of this discussion. You're going to hear some straight facts from us and some just realities of what we're facing. I'm a firm believer that any elected official or public servant or public employee owes the public transparent, honest information. I would much rather tell you the reality of the situation than try and tell you what you want to hear. So all I ask from all of you is that you understand the folks up here want to do the best they can for all the residents in New Hampshire. They want to do the best they can for our dam system, and they want to do the best they can for the dams that we'll be discussing tonight specifically. But there's just some basic realities we're facing, some financial, some state of infrastructure realities, and just realities in terms of staff resources and our ability to both rehab these, maintain these dams, and operate them in a way that pleases everyone. So all we ask is that you receive the information in that spirit. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your concerns. We certainly want to hear anything we can do better. We're very much open to all of that. All I ask is you just understand we are coming at it from a place of we're going to let you know the realities we're facing and how we're going to do our best to manage them, but we want to do it in a collaborative way. So with that, I'll hand it over to Corey.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ted. So I will go through, if everybody has the handout, I'll basically just go through it and we can just discuss everything. The only question I do have, comment I do have is if you have questions, please hold them to the end, and then there'll be mics being passed around. And so just raise your hand. Town of Goffstown folks will make sure that you get a mic, and then you can ask your question, and we'll try to address it the best we can. So obviously, as you know, we are all here for the Piscataquog River sites. And so if you turn to the first page in which the agenda is laid out, I just want to take a moment to kind of point out each site. I'm sure everybody's familiar with each dam, but essentially we start, and the Dam Bureau, when I start talking about different things in different parts of the dam, we always generally move in an upstream to downstream direction and always looking downstream. So if I start talking about the right abutment, I mean on the right side of the river looking downstream, left side is always looking downstream. So if I start talking about powerhouse or this or that, and on the right or left side, it's always looking downstream. And so as you see on that map there, we have the three different sites in question. We obviously have Hadley Falls Dam in downtown Goffstown. Just downstream of that is Glen Lake, the Greg Falls Dam, and then a little while further downstream is Maskey Lake with Kelly's Falls Dam, which is actually located in Manchester. And so with Kelly's Falls Dam is essentially the outlet of the Piscataquog River watershed. It's a 217 square mile watershed, and tonight we're talking about 3 of the 6 state-owned dams within that watershed, but there are actually quite a few dams in various states of repair and disrepair all throughout the entire watershed. And so with that, let's start talking a little bit about the state of state-owned dams. And so we are responsible here at the Dam Bureau for the repair and reconstruction of 275 state-owned dams. Those dams are owned by NHDES, which I am an employee of, along with New Hampshire Fish and Game, DOT, DNCR, UNH, and New Hampshire Veterans Home. The vast majority of those dams are owned by DES and Fish and Game. There's not too many by the other ones, but essentially, we are responsible for that large inventory, and we are actually responsible for the operations of roughly 200 of those dams, both the DES and Fish and Game owned ones. So it's quite the task that we're handed to try to accomplish on a daily basis. And so this map right here shows the locations of all those sites. So as you can see, we're in communities all throughout the state, everywhere from on the seacoast up to Pittsburgh, on the Canadian border, and down to the Massachusetts line as well. So with that, our resources are stretched all throughout the entire state. And primarily, those resources are, as of right now, are being focused on high-hazard dams. So of those 275 dams, we have 61 high-hazard dams, and all three, Hadley, Greg's Falls, and Kelly's Falls, are all high-hazard dams. So they fit into that same criteria, which essentially means that if the dam was to fail, either during a sunny day or during a flood condition, there would be loss of life. And so with all three of those sites, that's the responsibility that we have, is to maintain those sites in a proper order so that those folks living downstream are not at threat because of those dams. And so with that, in order to bring all those 61 high hazard dams into compliance, we're looking at a roughly $300 million requirement to do that. We also have 32 significant hazard dams, which impact state roads, other infrastructure. May not be a loss of life, but big economic loss associated with those sites. We're looking at roughly $54 million with those sites. And then low hazard dams, which make up the vast majority of our dams throughout the state, along with non-menace structures. Essentially, low hazard dams are dams that if they were to fail, it would be a town road or other property impacts, but hopefully no loss of life. And so we're also looking at a similar cost to try to bring those into compliance. So with all that being said, we have quite the task that we have to try to accomplish here, and trying to rehabilitate all these state-owned dams all throughout the state of New Hampshire. And so as I go through both the description of Hadley's and what we're doing with it, and the description of Greg's and what we're doing, and the description of Kelly's, just keep that in mind, that these three sites are also being looked at from a holistic perspective all throughout the state when it comes to trying to accomplish rehabilitation at all three of these sites. And so let's move on to Hadley Falls Dam. So Hadley Falls Dam, as you all know, is right in downtown Goffstown, built in 1921. The state took over the ownership of the dam in 1968. The one thing about this site that is unique from the other two sites is the state of New Hampshire does not own the powerhouse. So the powerhouse that is located on the right-hand side of the river near the new development that's going on, that developer actually owns the powerhouse. The state of New Hampshire does not. Whereas down at both Greg Falls and Kelly's Falls, the state of New Hampshire owns both the dam and the powerhouse associated with those. As we heard earlier, the site does have a FERC license, and once again, FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that oversees all hydropower sites throughout the United States. And the last time we generated power at this site was in 2007. And since that time, we've been trying to pull in a new operator. It's been a challenge by the state not owning the powerhouse, but also the revenue that could potentially be generated at that site. At that site, the power generating capacity is 0.2 megawatts. So just to put that in perspective, Greg's Falls, just downstream, generates 3.5. So orders of magnitude more power can be generated from that facility than can at Hadley's. And the reason for that is, as you all know, Greg's Falls is a much larger dam. The water level is much, much higher at that site, so you have a lot more water pressure pushing through that dam to allow for higher generating capacity at that location. So throughout this timeline that we've been trying to bring in an operator at the site, FERC has been notifying the state quite often to try to come into compliance with both restarting hydropower there and rehabilitating the site. And in 2020, we worked with a consultant to do a stability analysis on that at that location. The stability analysis looked at not only the spillway at that location, but also the walls underneath the apartment building on the left-hand side, that a building that's right downtown, and the other structures associated with the dam. That study found that the dam is structurally deficient during a flood flood event. So if we were to see a flood event, that dam could either slide out of the way or rotate out of the way, causing a failure of the dam and causing issues both at the powerhouse and at that structure on the left-hand side. And so that really prompted us and FERC to really we need to come to a resolution here. In March of this year, FERC sent us a letter saying within 60 days, the state of New Hampshire needs to figure out what they're doing with this dam. You either need to surrender the license, and as part of that surrender, either remove the dam or rehabilitate the dam. The current status quo is not an option, or restart hydropower at that site with dam rehabilitation. The state of New Hampshire chose that we are going to surrender that license and remove the dam. Once again, this is in the context of everything that we have going on in the state of New Hampshire and the $414 million that we're looking at and trying to rehabilitate all these sites. And so, with that being said, we've had a couple of meetings with the town of Goffstown already. We've been working with the select board there on trying to figure out, what we're going to do moving forward. And one of those things that we are going to be doing is we're going to be working with a consultant to do a removal feasibility study. The town of Goffstown supported this, and as part of that study, we're going to be looking at basically 3 different options. One of the options being removing the spillway so that basically between the 2 buildings, that piece of concrete that the water currently flows over is gone, and the dam no longer exists. And there's that's kind of the lowest tier that we're looking at. The next option is we are going to be looking at working with federal agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, NOAA Fisheries, along with New Hampshire Fish and Game, to try to get federal money for fish passage through this location. And I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. So that's another option to try to do that. And then the third option is to do the fish passage along with working with the town of Goffstown to really try to revitalize this area, create public access down into the riverway. I know there's concerns about dry hydrants located downtown that feed off the Piscataquog River, along with drinking water wells that are located a couple thousand feet upstream from the dam that are also in the aquifer that may or may not be impacted by the removal of the dam. So there's a lot going on with this, and so we're just now starting that process of talking to different folks and also starting the process with consultants to look at what we need to do to make this work for all stakeholders, not only us, but also the town of Goffstown and all you folks as well. And so the timeline for that and the removal of Hadley's is unknown at this time. It's likely going to take years to go through the process of making sure that we have proper stakeholder engagement, proper permitting taking place, and that no page is left unturned as far as an issue that may come up moving forward. And there's also going to be a lot of design required. So one of the things you will see as part of this alternatives analysis is you will see folks out there doing surveys on the water, doing surveys below the water surface, trying to really figure out what did the river look like before that dam was ever constructed. So trying to determine if there is falls right there, like the rocks you see just downstream of the dam, how far do those rocks go upstream? Can fish move through here without having to change that at all? So that's part of this whole process. And so it's going to be ongoing as we move forward. The other thing that we are doing currently is we're looking at the entire watershed and trying to determine just how much water is going to pass through this site along with Greg's and Kelly's during different storm events. It's been decades since we've done that, and so now we're reevaluating that to try to determine when we remove the dam, what is it going to be as far as water flow during different storm events. On a day-to-day basis, the water that you see there today, yes, the pond will be gone, but the water that comes out of that dam flows over that spillway and continues down into Glen Lake. That is not going to change. The water discharge that comes out of that site is still going to remain the same. Essentially, what comes into that site immediately goes out, and so that will remain the same. So moving on to Greg's Falls. So as we move just downstream, we've got Greg's Falls, which obviously many of you are familiar with, Glen Lake and all the resources that provides. The dam is owned by NHDES, once again, both the powerhouse and the dam, and is leased to Eagle Creek Renewable Energy, who holds that FERC license. And so Eagle Creek is responsible for everything that you see out at that site. They generate power at that facility, and they also are responsible for the ongoing operations, maintenance, and capital investment at that facility. So just for example, this summer they have to put a new roof on the powerhouse. Eagle Creek is going to be paying for that out of their coffers. Along with, they're also doing studies on that stability, on that spillway as well, stability studies and other things, and they're doing that all on their own as well. And so it's really beneficial to have an operator at these sites in which they can generate enough revenue to pay for all these upkeep and infrastructure and everything else. And so that's one of the things that NHGS is really striving to do. So once again, we talked about how much power can be generated at that facility. Now, I'm going to discuss Fish Passage a little bit more, particularly at Kelly's. However, one of the things with Fish Passage is that if Fish Passage does occur at Kelly's, Eagle Creek is on the hook with trying to implement Fish Passage at Greg's. As we all know, that is a very tall dam and a very difficult dam to get fish over. And so one of the things we are working on down at Kelly's is trying to bring Eagle Creek into the fold to try to develop a Fish Passage system down at that location in which they could essentially build what they call a truck and transport facility down there where fish can be loaded into a truck, moved around Greg's Falls Dam, and then put into the Piscataquog River upstream of the dam. If that happens, there's miles and miles of river that open up, actually hundreds of miles, if you count all the tributaries associated with the river, that open it up for fish habitat all throughout the river system. And so here at NHGS, we are continuing to work with Eagle Creek and really trying to build upon that relationship that we have with them. We will have to renegotiate the lease at some point in time, and our intent is to, try to work with them so that that lease is built so that it works for both parties and that dam remains in its current condition, along with Glen Lake remaining in its current condition that you see today for decades to come. So moving on to Kelly's Falls Dam. So obviously this is the last dam we're going to be discussing here tonight. Once again, the dam is owned and the powerhouse are owned by NHGS and currently leased to Green Mountain Power. The dam, the generating capacity at Kelly's Falls is roughly 0.45 megawatts, so a little more than twice of what Hadley can do, but quite a bit less than what Greg Falls can do. So at this point last year, Green Mountain Power was in the process of relicensing that facility. One of the things that happens with FERC licenses is generally every 40 years you have to renew that license. And during that renewal process, all the different agencies that might be associated with that river, different stakeholders, are allowed to weigh in and provide comment to FERC as part of that licensing. And what came out of the relicensing process, because their current license expires next year, was that they were going to have to implement Fish Passage at that facility. And unfortunately, when GMP, Green Mountain Power, looked into this, they found that the economics just weren't working out. It was going to be too cost effective, or cost too much to put that Fish Passage in there and also generate enough revenue to not only operate the site but also build that Fish Passage system. So because of that, Green Mountain Power decided to not relicense the site and actually surrender the license. So they are now in the process with FERC on surrendering their hydropower license, terminating the lease with NHDES, and pulling out of the site as of next year. So where that leaves us is NHDES is now going to have to come back in and actually operate and maintain that site. Unfortunately, we do not have the resources, staff, or revenue to actually accomplish that. So where we are at right now is we are trying to negotiate with other dam operators, such as Eagle Creek, to take over that site. They may take it over and generate hydropower. They may take it over and not generate hydropower. There's a lot of different things that come into play. So if they don't generate hydropower at that facility, then the FERC requirements are not there. There is no FERC license. That dam is regulated by NHDES, the dam safety section, and the dam has to meet that criteria. if they choose to run hydropower there, then they're going to have to establish a new license with FERC. Either way, NHDS is trying to look at implementing fish passage at that facility and really trying to implement fish passage along the whole Piscataquog River. So the conversation with the resource agencies at Kelly's Falls regarding this license surrender immediately turned to how can we make this work for everyone? And so one of those things is there's federal money out there. If the site is not a hydro site or no longer has a FERC license, it is eligible for federal fish passage money. And so right now DES is working with our consultant on putting together a package to try to apply for that funding so that DES can build a fish ladder at Kelly's Falls, along with trying to work with Eagle Creek to develop a truck and transport facility there, so that achieves the goals at not only Kelly's, but also Greg's Falls. And as part of that package, we could also be trying to get funding for removal of Hadley. So that way, the ecosystem is put back to the way the resources agencies want to see it, with fish passage all the way through, and the dam remains as you see it today. We don't have an operator lined up for when Green Mountain Power leaves next year, but once again, we are working towards that and trying to work with not only Eagle Creek, but other hydro operators as well. Certainly, if Eagle Creek says we are not interested in doing this, then there's other hydro operators out there that could potentially be interested. So we are continuing to negotiate with folks. There's a lot of moving parts. That's why a lot of this information may not be in this package, because even as of earlier this week, we were finalizing some of the contracts with some of the consultants on these various items, and just yesterday had a discussion with the resource agencies as to where things are at and how we're moving forward, both from a lease perspective for Kelly's Falls, along with the grant opportunity that we have as well. And so, you know, it may come up tonight, may not come up, but one of the things that you know, folks are probably very curious of what can we do to help out to try to really make sure that not only Kelly's stays there for years to come, but other Greg's also stays there for years to come. One of the things in the grant application package, the federal resources agencies, is they're really keen on community engagement and working with you folks. And so having this meeting here tonight and the other meetings that we're have is all part of that package. Working with the town of Goffstown is all part of that. Certainly, any letters of support from the lake associations would be very beneficial, along with the communities that are affected, both City of Manchester, where Kelly's Falls Dam actually is, and the town of Goffstown as well. And so I'll be touching base with the town of Goffstown as far as any possible letters of support, but that's one of the things that these federal resource agencies are really looking for to help generate the funds and actually get that grant so that we can actually make this work. The other question, what happens if the grant doesn't come through? Well, if the grant doesn't come through, DES is still committed to working with a hydropower producer to try to make this site work. Once again, either with or without hydropower. There's a lot of benefits for Eagle Creek if they take this over, even without hydropower. You know, they essentially are controlling the site directly downstream of them, and how that all plays into fish passage requirements and everything else. And so we will continue to work on negotiations with those folks, even if something drops off, and we're going to continue marching forward. And so with that, that's pretty much where we are at right now. I don't know if you guys have anything else.
No, I think we're going to hit the question, right?
Yep, exactly.
So one quick thing. There's obviously a ton of folks in here, and we want to hear from as many of you as possible. So what I ask is, please keep the kind of remarks piece that lead into the question. Please keep it as short as possible. And secondly, if someone has made a comment or has asked a question you were interested in, can we please not repeat them? We want to get to as much information as possible and to as many of you as possible. So with that, why don't we start taking questions, and we'll point it to the right person on the stage.
Oh, that might, yeah, that's probably that one.
Sounds like it. All right, please.
Good evening, John Mitchell, 159 Moose Club Park Road. There seems to be only 3 items on the table from your presentation: electrical generation, non-electrical generation, and biological. And of course, safety, of course. And you're saying that dams may not be safe, they may be displaced in flood, they may be unsafe. Understood. Downfall or downstream catastrophic occurrences may occur. Okay, understood. The driver, it seems to me, in this whole discussion is the fish ladders. That seems to be the point. Now, there was a July 28 letter from Fish and Game that said, hey, we're just kind of going to work. Fish and Game, state, didn't want to just take down the dam. They say, well, we're going to try and get our own grants and try and work through that process. What I'm not hearing from this presentation is those updates and these options that may be more present than what we are currently hearing from your presentation. Thank you.
So that letter from Fish and Game was in response to the Green Mountain Power Hydro license surrender. And it was essentially a letter saying that, yeah, Fish and Game is committed to working with whomever it is or however it is to try to make this fish passage work here. One of the things that Fish and Game has worked diligently on is they've been working with the resource agencies not only to implement fish passage here, but part of a holistic Merrimack River plan. And so one of the things that Ted Deers spoke about was just how productive the Piscataquog is. Right now, they're seeing blueback herring and shad schooling right at the toe of Kelly's Falls Dam. So it essentially qualifies as what they call a tier 1 or top priority for trying to implement fish passage here, because they know the fish are already there. They're saying, I don't know if this is actually going to occur with fish passage, but they're saying if fish passage did occur there, they could see 10,000 shad and over 50,000 blueback herring moving upriver. And so that was really the emphasis behind that letter, was that they're committed to trying to get fish passage to occur at this site. Now, it may come down to they may have to be the ones to operate that facility. I don't know, but that's one of the things that may come out of that. So you're right. I mean, fish passage was ultimately what really started this conversation down at Kelly's. If fish passage was not a requirement, I think Green Mountain Power would be renewing their license, and they would be continuing on to produce power there for decades to come, as we are all used to.
Corey, can I add something to that? There's also something extremely fundamental to this entire conversation. The impact of the dams that wasn't associated with its original purpose. The original purpose for these dams were to produce electricity. A byproduct of that was creating new recreational water sheds and water areas that have been taken advantage of since they were created. Here's the challenge. It was created to produce electricity, and therefore the economics of the dam are based on it producing electricity. So we have the challenge of, now that it's no longer viable from an economic perspective for what it was created for its original purpose, we're dealing with what happens with the other very important, both from a cultural and economic perspective, of the other impacts that weren't built into the overall system of how these things were built, paid for, maintained, and reconstructed. So undermining all of this is a lot of the interest you all have in these dams was a byproduct of its original purpose and not part of the math and budget in terms of how these things were funded, built, and operated. So that's our challenge. And then when you throw on top of that new federal requirements and hydro being less economical than it once was, that it just doesn't you don't get as much for hydroelectricity as you used to. There are dams in the state that are producing hydro that at some point have to pay to the grid for it to take their electricity because their electricity is not needed at the time. It's just all those challenges coming together is what leads us to here. Now, I say all of that, we are extremely understanding and realize the impacts that were created that weren't necessarily its original purpose are extremely important to us. We're not underselling or undervaluing how important that is, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're going to come up with as many creative solutions as possible. But you have to remember that, and as you're thinking about this, that's the sequence of events that led us to here. They were built for an original purpose. They've gone, most of the dams in our system were built for 50 years. They're over 100 years old. So we have infrastructure that hasn't been addressed as much as it's needed. Its original purposes are no longer there, and therefore the original financial dynamic that built, paid, constructed, and operated them aren't there anymore. And then you throw on top of that new federal requirements that make operating more difficult and make the infrastructure needs more difficult. So that's the foundation of this entire conversation.
We got some questions back here.
Yep, sure.
Carla Garrick, 63 Direct Court, West Manchester. Of course, even though there is the original intent, obviously the economic driver now would be the real estate and the property owners there. So I don't think we should lose sight of that. We may have shifted the economics from hydroelectric to something else, but the something else does exist. My questions are as follows. What was the budget, the last posted budget you guys had? And I would appreciate it if you could explain where a $514 million hole came from, because that's a pretty big hole. And if you could tell us how much each fish ladder is going to cost. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me also address the first part of your statement. As I said, completely understand, not undervaluing the importance of what was created. The problem is the new economic driver doesn't add to the budget for the maintenance, construction, and overall maintenance and repairs of the piece of infrastructure. So yes, that's created and it has impacts. It's just those impacts don't lead to being able to reconstruct and operate this piece of infrastructure. That's the challenge. The answer, the budget, it's a little challenging to answer. The way I prefer to answer it is our process. Our process is New Hampshire operates on a biennial budget. Every 2 years, we go before the legislature. The governor proposes a budget with input from the state agencies. The House debates it, the Senate debates it. Then they all decide something all three entities can live with, and we get our budget every 2 years. As part of our process for the capital needs, we seek as much. We look for as many federal opportunities as possible to address those capital needs, and then we put in money into what's called our capital budget. The capital budget is the way the state funds infrastructure projects, other projects. We ask for as much as we can every year to address these needs. To your last point, $414 million hole. I appreciate it being expressed that way, and I do understand where you're coming from. It is just a fact, and I don't think I'm being overly critical of all the fine men and women who have run for state rep and state senator over the years and have done their best with the budgets and the situations they've been presented. But there's just a basic fact that the infrastructure, and this is across the country, our infrastructure hasn't been maintained compared to the deterioration. And the last time this was a real question when these dams first hit their their life, and when they should have been replaced, rehabbed, rebent, et cetera. The solution was the state took over ownership of a lot of them and did the best they could with them, but we are now paying for the combination of the state taking over a lot of dams that really, if you look at the heart of the types of dams the state should be owning and operating, wouldn't fall into that category, and just a lot of policy decisions over the years of where to direct the funding that the state has available, and it not being invested in these dams. And those are policy decisions that have been made over the last 25 budgets, the last 50 years. So no one has been hiding this need. We have, the Dam Bureau has consistently let every governor and state legislature know the realities of what we're facing. But I will say this, in fairness to those folks, and I'll tell you, an area of New Hampshire DES probably could have done a better job. When you have engineers, so I'm very unusual at New Hampshire DES. I have a political science degree and a history and philosophy minor. So I'm one of the only non-scientists, non-engineers in the whole place. I'm just a policy person. But the way, the engineers and our folks have always looked at it is they kind of take it at a dam by dam perspective. The problem in front of them, they look at it. The problem in front of them, they look at it. But what I really want to commend, Ted, as under his leadership as our fairly new assistant director of the water division, and Corey stepping up in his role as becoming the fairly new administrator of the Dam Bureau, is they really realized, and with encouragement by like Dan and the rest of the staff, they really realized it's really time to step back and take a system-wide approach to our dam in the state. Take a look at all 275, take account of all of them, what are the overall needs, and how can we take a system-wide approach? We don't have a time machine. We can't go back in history and change how we approach these things previously. But I really commend our staff. I think they're doing a much better job of starting to explain to the governor and our legislators the overall system we have in front of us, its needs, and the policy decisions that are in front of them.
So, excuse me, ma'am, we have.
Yeah, no, that's a fair, I forgot that, fair enough. There's no exact cost, a little bit, it'll depend on its height, its range, but a decent range is probably.
So the ladder at Kelly's would be in the order of anywhere probably between 4 to 10 million, depending on the whole truck and transport and exactly what's built there. But to put that in perspective, Eagle Creek estimated that a ladder, just a ladder, nothing else, at Greg's Falls would be on the order of over $7 million just for that. So.
I have a question. At Elm Street, also Goffstown Waterways Association. Anybody want to take it over? Here's the thing, I don't understand. Why does utilities get to use it and walk away? If you and I rented anything, we would have to maintain it, right? Why are they allowed to use it, make a profit, and then dump it in our lap? It seems to me like it's, one of those dirty dirt things where it's, cradle to whatever. Why do they just walk away and leave us with it? I don't get it.
Okay, so a couple different questions. Listen, I won't tell anyone in this room how they want to think and choose to characterize how past operators would handle it. But looking at it a little more objectively, they had an agreement. They took that agreement based on it being a financially viable operation for them. That was the deal that was presented to them. When it got to the point where it wasn't financially viable as a for-profit entity, they, all of them have done the appropriate thing from their perspective, in their mind, and they have followed the rules in front of them of how, when they make that decision, excuse me, they step away from it. They're not leaving it behind. It wasn't a piece of infrastructure they ever owned. All they ever did is say, while it's financially viable, we will operate it and we will pay the costs that are consistent with what's agreed in our lease. And when that's no longer makes economic sense, they made that decision. Revenue from these dams. Well, let me just have him answer the revenue question, then you're up next.
Sure. So I believe as of last year, I'm not positive on this, but I believe last year the revenue generated into the state from Green Mountain Power down at Kelly's was roughly $7,000, whereas up at Greg's it was on the order of $200,000. So and once again, this goes a little bit to the budget question. That money does come in. That is what funds our dam maintenance fund, and that dam maintenance fund is what is used to do operations and repairs all throughout the state. And as Mark alluded to, on top of that, we also look for general fund money and along with capital funds as well to augment basically the shortfall that comes into that fund.
We got a question here, and then we'll come back.
Hi, my name's Mark Blevins, and One Riverview in Goffstown. Now, I might be incorrect in this, but in the 1930s, wasn't there a big flood in Manchester? And didn't they do all these dam systems as part of the Army Corps of Engineers to slow the water down? You had started saying something about it at the beginning, like you don't know what would happen if there was a flood in the state up further, how the water would influx down this way. And didn't they put most of these dam systems in before even the power, just to slow the water down before it came down here? Because I believe it wiped out like Lawrence and it wiped out down all that way. And they put most of these systems in to slow that water down when we do have the monsoons that do come through here. That's what I call them.
Yeah, no, you're completely correct on that. So obviously, the Piscataquog River watershed does benefit from the Hopkinton-Everett project. The North Branch is basically augmented by that facility up there, and that facility does store a lot of storm water when we hit the storms. And you're right, during the 1930s, I know pretty much the downtown area was inundated. I know both buildings on both sides were completely inundated at that point in time. And in fact, upstream, another high hazard dam the state of New Hampshire owns at Ware Reservoir actually failed. And so you're right. Now, unfortunately, that Hopkinton-Everett system only protects the North Branch. The Middle Branch and the South Branch are not on any flood control system, so there's still natural floods that come in through there and everything else. But yeah, all throughout the state, some of the dams that we are required to own and maintain, we have flood control facilities on the Sauhegan River, flood control facilities on the Baker River to help with the Merrimack system. The state of New Hampshire does not own Hopkinton-Everett. That is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers.
We have one over here.
One.
Make sure you say your name.
Correct. Yeah, one thing I do want to just mention is that none of these sites we're talking about here tonight, Hadley, Greg's, Kelly's, none of them are flood control dams. I mean, I think there's a lot of people here who were here in 2006, 2007, when there was a lot of flooding that occurred on both of those bodies of water. Unfortunately, yeah, those dams are not designed, built, or maintained for flood retention purposes, unlike these other flood control sites where even this past July, we were seeing some of these flood control sites storing upwards of 50 feet of water. So,
and just to add to that point from a broader perspective, that's part of what Corey will be doing in an overall evaluation. As you look at any 275 dams, any dam that is there that is for flood control will be approached in terms of that from the public need that's created by that, and it would be identified. But as they stated, the three dams we're talking about, none of those contribute to flood control. As a matter of fact, right now, Hadley's is more in danger of failing than it is of protecting anything.
Hi, I'm Jack Carbonell, 35 Shirley Park Road. Been on either the Mill Pond or Glen Lake for all but 4 of my 60 years. First, I'd like to say that Great Falls Dam was first a 50-foot earthen structure before the 60-foot concrete structure that now produces electricity. So I believe it was built for recreational areas, not for electricity, just for a little bookkeeping stuff. Secondly, since it has been there since 1850, 1875, something like that, what were the fish that were traveling up before that dam was put in place? How many blue herring? Was there salmon going up there? Was it alewife? Or were we trying to create a new passage that fish didn't climb up at that time?
I wish Ted's going to be our closest
So-
at the fishing game.
So I've dealt with fish passage issues for most of my career, and generally, I'll just point out a couple of examples. Exeter River, if you look at the seal, the Exeter town seal from 16 whatever, it has an alewife sitting right on it, and so when that dam was removed, the alewife came back, they went up. These rivers that we have in the Merrimack watershed were highly productive for salmon. So obviously, salmon is no longer really a thing in these watersheds because of all the dams and because of other aspects. But certainly, shad and alewife are very important fish and part of the ecosystem. They would have been here, a millennia ago. Now, this is an interesting question that you raise, and it's a fascinating one from a restoration perspective because we've done so many things to our rivers. So for example, if you look at Hadley, where the channel is may not have been where the channel was when the fish were using it a millennia ago. And the same is true on the other dams, and this is true around the state. So what happens, and this is one of the, I think, the weird things to get your head around, is that because we've encroached on those passages by all the infrastructure that we have, whether it be bridges or culverts or houses or buildings or whatever it is, and we've channelized rivers and we moved rivers, that we oftentimes now have to help the fish that would have been there naturally because all of that has been changed around. So were there fish on the river? Yes. Were they going to go up in exactly the same numbers? Probably a lot more. Were they there? I don't know. I mean, so anyway, but. Right. So the thing that Kish. Right. So this is great. This is a great fish discussion. I'm not a fish biologist. Is there an ichthyologist in the house? But what I will say to you is that the Fish and Wildlife Service, who are our national fish experts, as well as NOAA Fisheries, who are our anadromous fish. Anadromous fish are those that move up and down between freshwater and saltwater. They have identified this river, the Piscataquog River, as one of the #1 targets for fish restoration in the entire Northeast. Why? Because it has the habitat, because it has the numbers already. What did the fish say when it hit that first structure? Damn. So that's, when you look at those factors, this is a super important watershed that you all live in relative to reestablishment of some of these historic fish, and they're so important to the overall ecosystem, including the ocean ecosystem, which is certainly under pressure right now because of changing temperatures and other things. So anyway, just want to put the fish piece out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm going to just come at it from a jurisdictional perspective. Regardless of what we think, we're going to be hit with federal requirements. So we have to follow the federal requirements no matter if we love them or not. And number two, just so I love history. I was a history minor, and I certainly welcome to hear more of the history of the dams in the area and what's happened. But regardless of all of that, the situation we face in front of ourselves is the benefits of the dam. How do the benefits of the dam contribute to funding them? So it's not enough that even if some of them were built at a time and creating of a recreational watershed was one of its original purposes. The position we find ourselves in front of us is, how do we pay for their rehabilitation? How do we pay for what's required to meet federal standards? And how do we pay for operating and maintaining them? So again, I can't wait to hear more history of this stuff, but there is a basic practical, and everyone in here has a family budget of, it only matters if it leads to funding back to the piece of infrastructure. I promised this young lady she'd be next.
Thank you. Hi, Elaine Aubin, 19 Arrowhead in Goffstown. Our family's been there for 75 years, so definitely summer place, recreational use. You talked initially about Hadley Falls Dam being structurally unsafe, or unsound, perhaps, better word. I'm wondering, we're talking about the cost of the fish ladders and all that. Do we know how structurally safe those other two dams are if we put all this money into building fish ladders? You know, certainly understandable. You guys have done a great job of explaining all that, but do we know they're going to be okay?
Yeah, so one of the things, I know Eagle Creek is looking into that at Greg's right now currently, and Green Mountain Power has looked into it in the past. One of the things that we run into is, and this is not only just a structural thing, but also a flood control thing, is, you know, these dams have been there for hundreds of years and nothing has happened. However, one of the things that we are now seeing is, with better and better computer modeling technology, not only from what these large flood events will actually do, but also how the concrete interacts with the bedrock and the soil and all of that, we're finding, faults with these dams. Now, those faults may have been there forever, but these dams may not have seen the high flow events that they're likely to see in the future. And so that's one of the things that comes up. People say, well, this dam's been here forever. No, nothing's changed. And why is it all of a sudden, structurally deficient? And a lot of times it's because the new analyses and the new procedures that are being done are looking at these issues.
Why don't you cover how we're going to, the first step is studying all of them before we do anything.
And so, yeah, we're certainly looking at all of them from a flow standpoint, and then, like I said, we've looked at the stability issues up at Kelly's. Up at Hadley. We know what those issues are. Eagle Creek, as the leasee, they're responsible for Greg's Falls. They are looking at it, and then Kelly's Falls. That's one of the things that FERC will take into account as part of the surrender. When Green Mountain Power goes to surrender it, they're going to look through all the different possible deficiencies at this site and make sure all the boxes are checked. Now, in 5 or 10 years, could we reanalyze either Greg's or Kelly's and find something? Yes, we could. But as of right now, we don't see any issues, or we don't know about any issues that are the same as what we're seeing up at Hadley.
Everybody raise their hands. We'll get to this one at a time.
Michael Allard, 89 Ruby Park, Manchester. Goffstown. Next to Rand Goffstown. Follow up to something that you said about 4 or 5 minutes ago. So the dams, the operators have generated $7,000 worth of revenue, Kelly's Falls, and $200,000 Great Falls annually, yes, or roughly annually? Last year, let's say, correct?
Yeah.
You said that, okay.
Yep.
And did you also say earlier that all of the costs of operating those 2 dams are covered by the operator?
Correct. Yep.
And then you said that all those funds that you collect from state are used to repair dams across the state.
Correct.
So these 2 dams generated a lot of revenue since the state took over 30, 40 years ago, and all that money went to other dams in the state.
That is how that is how.
No, that's just a follow-up. I still have a question.
No, that's fine. So the dam maintenance fund that was established decades and decades ago.
The answer is yes.
Yes, the answer
Okay,
is
thank you.
yes.
Thank you. No, we'll just keep it short because Mark said, forget the commentary, let's get to the brass tacks here. So my question is this. April 1st, we're not going to have an operator at Kelly Falls Dam, correct?
Yes, that could be the
Okay,
case.
so then the state's going to be taking over the dam April 1st, April 2nd.
Correct.
What's life going to be like then?
I don't know at this time. So one of the big issues that you folks living on the impoundment know about is the flashboards. And those are extremely difficult and extremely time-consuming and staff-intensive, and the safety associated with installing those boards is very high. And so that is one of the big issues that we are concerned about. The other big issue is trying to figure out what to do with the hydro unit. Can we discharge water through that gate? Right now, a lot of water goes through that gate and into the hydro unit and, helps provide flow all the way through. One of the things we may run into as we move through this process is that hydro unit cannot discharge water without generating. And so that hydro unit's locked, the gate is shut, all the flow then goes over the dam. So there could potentially be more fluctuation than impoundment. There may not be. So at this point, not sure, but yeah, if the state takes it over, we're going to do everything we can to keep it the way you folks are used to.
So the state's going to have to maintain those boards and come and fix them when they break. Is that correct?
I can't say that right now because I don't know exactly what's all going to be entailed of that.
So let me answer the question a little more from a process. And here's the bottom line. What will happen is at all three locations. So Greg's is a little different because there's an operator who right now has given no indication of not having a desire to continue operating it and maintaining it. So they have a responsibility with, oversight from us of looking what's needed to be within federal requirements and to continue to run a safe and efficient operation that will, create some economic, be beneficial and create a profit as a private sector company. The other two, with each of them, what will happen is we will look at the available options and alternative analysis will be done, and that'll be done in conjunction with studies of the whole watershed up and down, modeling that Corey was talking about earlier. And so it'll be looked at from a safety perspective. It'll be looked at from what alternatives are available, the cost of those alternatives, and what reasonable and realistic options exist to meet those funding needs. The scenario Corey laid out earlier for Kelly's is trying to go from a dam that currently doesn't meet current federal requirements in terms of fish passage and is being operated by an outside operator to that operator is gone, a way to fund that leveraging federal dollars and all in a way that'll keep the impoundment. So we are going to look for options that meet the federal needs and meet the federal requirements and keep as much of the impoundments as possible. But we are not going to be able to tonight tell you that for sure that is going to happen because we don't know if we're going to get those federal dollars. We don't know what, at the end of the day, what Eagle Creek is going to be willing to do, what makes sense for them. So we've had great conversations with both the resources and the one operator who will be staying, and we're going to continue those. But we can't make any guarantees about what we can definitely do for any of them. But the last thing I can guarantee is DES will continue to involve all of the communities impacted, in this case, Manchester and Goffstown, throughout the process. I'm going to go to the representative, and then we'll go around the room. Representative Platt, go ahead. Oh,
Forgive me for not standing. I just went through back surgery a couple of weeks ago. I've heard from some people some expectations from our state reps. I'm one of the 6 state reps representing Goffstown. And isn't this between, as a state legislature in their budget, we fund DES and all your expertise, and you do a great job. We fund Fish and Game also, and other agencies. Isn't this really a federal issue you're dealing with? What realistically can the state do beyond letters of support? We're budgetary wrestling every year to fund schools and police and prisons, and you all. Do you have any answer? Anything we could constructively do more than we're doing?
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Representative. So a couple of points to that. We are working with other stakeholders who care about the dams in the state, and we will be asking our governor and the congressional delegation to start making the case of some of the policies that seem contradictory. I'll give you an example. As all of you know, the Biden administration has made climate change an extremely high priority for their administration, and have put a lot of money, effort, and energy into that throughout the last couple of years. But at the same time, some of the decisions they're making, like not putting fish passage towards a hydro, a clean energy, making that an ineligibility, seems a little inconsistent with the overall. If you want to encourage non-carbon based generation, that's an example of something that discourages it. So we will be doing our best to. Senator Hassan has been very active on the issue of dams, and we've already spoken to her office. So we are going to engage our federal delegation with the support of our governor about trying to point out some of the inconsistencies we see in various policies. But to your overall point, we will do the best we can to access the federal dollars we can to help pay for the capital needs of these facilities. And every couple of years, we'll come to you in HB 25, and we'll get as many bucks as we can to do as many dams as we can every 2 years. And what we're bringing to the table is it would take $414 million to take care of all of them right now. And that's the bottom line challenge we have in front of us.
Your name and address.
Okay. All right. My name is Roger Therian. I'm a property owner in Manchester, as well as in Goffstown on the Moose Club Park area. There's a lot of people here tonight. I don't know if any are outside in the parking lot, but you can tell there's a lot of interest in what's going on here tonight. Two questions. One is, how do I, as an abutter, as a property owner, how do I get accurate and up-to-date information on the future of what's going to take place here in the coming months and so on? That's number one. And number two, I'm going to follow up Mike's point. Who do I call when the boards break after April so that we can get them replaced?
All right, I'll answer number one. My friends over here will answer number two. Sorry, your first. Repeat your first question. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm in a butter.
Yeah. How do you get accurate information?
How do I get?
How do you get accurate? So, yeah. So this is the third meeting we've had. So we hope nights like tonight is providing that information. And I hope I'm not putting you guys on the spot. You guys, we've already made this recommendation to you guys. One of the recommendations we've made to the town is the creation of a dam committee that's made up of citizens, stakeholders, businesses, lake association folks who care about this. In other communities where dam removal was the ultimate decision made, those committees were vital in terms of being an avenue and a source of the community's desires and interest in how to move forward. And it's very helpful if you make that committee and it stayed, in the beginning, pick folks who really are willing to do it for 5, 6, 7 years, because that's how long this process could take. And they can be a great asset to both sides. They can be a great asset to the town and the DES in terms of communicating, wherever we are in the process, the interest, and at that point, what the feelings of the community are. And they can be a great asset to the folks you're representing and to being a source of providing that information. And we will always be available to the select board, the committee, and anyone who else comes to get the up-to-date information. Why don't you take the board? Yeah, the boards.
All right, and so when we reach this April, by all means, you can certainly reach out to me. My contact information is there. As far as, are we definitely going to be able to replace those boards? I hope so, but I don't know that that's a definite. And the reason for that is if water, once again, this is going back to the whole hydro thing, is that if water cannot go through that hydro system, all the water has to go over the spillway. If all the water is going over the spillway, there's never a safe time for us to get out there and actually replace those boards. And so that's, that is part of the conundrum we're facing. I know some of you know that a subcontractor to Green Mountain Power, Bancroft, actually goes out there and does do the installation out there. They do that for a fee from them. And so one of the things that the Lake Association may want to consider if they want to make sure that this does occur is trying to work with us to actually create an agreement where they hire Bancroft to do that. We have done that in other lakes, and it provides the Lake Association more, more input into the process and more of a hands-on into the process so that, you're in control of when those go up, when they come down, and that sort of thing. And, it kind of takes us out of the equation because if we're doing it on our own staff, our staff resources are going to be extremely stretched thin. And so there might be times that those boards trip, such as this past storm event, which I don't believe they did, but we had quite a few trip all throughout the state, in which it's going to take weeks for us to get out there and do it. And we also have to wait for the water to come down. So I don't have a good answer right now as to where that will stand come next spring.
We got questions over here. I just wanted to let everybody know that if you don't know the Goffstown website, we have a dam section, and everything that comes in as we get materials come in, it's automatically posted to that dam section. So if you go to the Goffstown website, you go over to dams, we have all the dams listed, each dam listed separately, and all the information for each dam is listed there as we get it. So that's about as up to date as we can do. Hope that helps you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Selectman, for making that point.
Oh, thank you.
So your name and address.
Oh, thank you. Oh, hello. My name is Diane Hinton, and I live at the upper end of Glen Lake. We have well over 100 residents on the lake, and I have questions concerning what will happen if the Greg Falls Dam was removed. Number one, property value is decreasing. Oh, gee, would the view tax be revoked? And what about recreation? We have boats and docks and people fishing and swimming, and Mountain Base Pond will be the only place that Goffstown residents could go. Oh my God, it's so small. And then, what is the alternative to the hydro that we are using, and it is profitable? Coal? Oil? Good Lord. And there is a federal law against the alteration of shoreline. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So I do want to address a couple of things, points you made, although I know they were rhetorical, but there are actually some responses to those. Number one, again, I hope we've said it and we'll say it again. We respect, appreciate, and understand the importance of the recreational and altered watersheds that have been created by these dams, and the property taxes that come along with it, by the waterfront properties created, the recreation, the economic development, the getting folks in town, your once-a-year festival you do. We are appreciative of all of it, but we all live in the real world. It only matters in terms of this infrastructure if it leads to funding for that infrastructure. Now, we care about these dams, and we're going to look for every way to fund them in whatever sources we can. But, you know, I appreciate you're going to keep making the point. We understand the lakefront property created by this. We understand the recreational activities that are created by this. We understand the economic development that comes from that. But our challenge is, how does that lead to paying for the rehabilitation and ongoing maintenance of those dams? And I do want to make one point, because it's not, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. There is no indication, we have zero indication that the operator is moving away from Great Falls. So, you know, I mean, if you want a real world, that's kind of, you know, elevator speech version of this, Hadley's is in a lot of trouble. Kelly's is losing an operator, and we're trying to figure out options. Greg's has a pretty solid future, and it's figuring out how does it interact with the rest of them.
Back here.
Hi, my name is Tammy Garthwaite. I live at 166 Barney Street in Manchester, so I obviously do not abut any of these bodies of water, but I do kayak on them frequently, and I'm super jealous of all your homes. My question is somewhat rhetorical, but I think it's a legitimate one.
It's surprising, Tammy.
I know. Obviously, Hadley Falls Dam is probably, you know, is on the way out. That's just a reality. The Great Falls doesn't sound, since the operator doesn't appear to be leaving, there seems to be some potential resolve there. And the one that seems to be in flux the most is the Kelly Falls Dam. Now, I'm involved with the Friends of the Piscataquog River Park, which will be directly impacted more than likely if that dam was to be removed. I get it. I do not fault the Department of whatever it is, whatever letters you guys are in the state.
Environmental services.
I do believe.
We'll switch to whatever.
No. I do believe that you guys are trying to find the most creative options and do what you can with the limited funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, if the Kelly Falls Dam does not have an operator and the state takes it over, and let's us presume that it does not collapse. I understand that there's federal regulations involved that we're trying to meet. If they do not provide federal funds to meet those regulations, then what? Why don't we just tell them to go pound sand and be done with it? Because we as a state send more money to DC than DC sends to us. So once again, we're stuck having to figure this out. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna send in the Army? Send the fish police, take away the governor's birthday? I just don't understand why we're forced as taxpayers to kowtow to DC.
So as you know, Tammy, as a citizen, I appreciate where you're coming from, and as a taxpayer myself. But the bottom line is the state and state agencies don't have the ability to take that approach, and I think you understand that. This is the federal government. Yes, we are a donor state. It doesn't mean we don't get money from the federal government. And there are many ways the federal government can penalize you, withholding funding you're deserved, charging fines. There are many ways the federal government has of encouraging you to follow the regulations they have prescribed. And as a state agency who is sworn to uphold the federal and state statutes and regulations that fall under our jurisdiction, our approach can't be, if we get to the end of the road, we'll wait for the fish army to come get us. We have to come up with solutions where we are going to be in compliance with all the laws and regulations that govern us, whether they be federal or state. Yeah, we haven't done really this side of the room.
My name is Jim Craig, 10A Cedar Way, Goffstown. Just a couple of questions. First one is, when is the lease up on Greg Falls?
Yeah, I don't have the exact date in front of me. I know it's coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. One thing I do want to mention, though, is the leases can be renegotiated if either party is looking to do so. And I do know that Eagle Creek is looking to actively renegotiate the lease for Greg's, along with they lease out several other dams that the state owns, more in the Winnipesaukee River water.
So they're looking to extend it?
Yes, they are looking to extend it. They're just looking to renegotiate it because of the capital investments that they have to do. You know, obviously, as a for-profit entity, they're looking at it as, we're doing all this work on the spillway. If we leave the site, the next leaseholder is going to benefit from that work. So they just want to renegotiate because of those capital investments that they're doing.
The updated lease will be part of the package we might put together.
Exactly.
And so you know, Corey did a great job earlier outlining the potential package. Part of that would be a renewed lease, might be part of it. So that's why, Greg's has a pretty good future in front of it. Kelly's, we're not sure. Hadley's has a very concerning future.
My second question is, with regard to the fish ladders, it just strikes me that if whoever it is that wants us to spend $15 million for fish ladders on 2 dams, there ought to be some recourse. Can you point us, or can you give us some sites of where exactly does the fish ladder rules, where are the rules? Who made that decision? What federal agency, according to what rule, and can we look at that? And are there waivers? Is there recourse under the same regulations or whatever they are that mandate it?
I certainly don't know the statutes off the top of my head that require it. However, I do know that a lot of times as part of this FERC licensing process, a lot of these hydropower entities actually create memorandums of agreement with the resource agencies that clearly outline, if fish move to here, you then have to put the ladder in. And that's what currently Eagle Creek has, I know, with the resource agencies for Greg.
Why don't you mention the federal resource agencies that normally we're talking,
Yeah, so obviously U.S. Fish and Wildlife is one resource agency that works on this. NOAA Fisheries is also another big agency that also works on this. And they work with FERC on all sites all throughout the, not only the state, but New England and the country. And so they're implementing this. A lot of those dams that you see that get taken out west on those big rivers for the salmon restoration, that's a very similar process to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't we hit it? We've hit this side a lot. Why don't we hit this side? We'll come back over here.
How you doing? Tony from 98 Lynchville Park Road. Now, you keep saying that we all have these vacation homes and whatnot, and you're talking about fish ladders of fish that haven't been here for 50 years. Now, we have a whole ecosystem down, on the river. I mean, we have otters, we have eagles, turtles, we got all kinds of stuff, and we're just worried about these fish that haven't been around for 50 years?
Well,
I'm just saying,
Yeah. So no, I appreciate where you're coming from. I never call them vacation homes. I know some of them are year-round homes, and no one, we get these are many different buildings and structures around it. So again, we are obligated to follow federal and state requirements. I am, wait, everyone. I appreciate where you're coming from, but we have to follow the law. We're a state agency. We can't be flippant about it, with all due respect. We have federal and state statutes and regulations we have to follow. The current federal requirements as being negotiated with FERC are what is being outlined here. That's the reality. You don't have to like it, but that's the reality we're facing. And we are facing pieces of infrastructure that don't have a funding source. So that's the reality we're facing. And the other dynamics involved are why we care about it. It's why we're here. And it's why we're going to try and come up with creative solutions. But we're not going to come up with those creative solutions by just pretending the other aspects involved don't exist. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I got a couple questions. How much does it cost to operate the Kelly's Falls Dam? Like, how much is that? You talk about the funding. How much is that funding that's necessary to run it?
Yeah, not being the direct operator of the site, I'm not sure.
Presumably less than $7,000 because that's what they're making. That's the revenue they're generating on it.
That's what they're paying for us in the lease payment.
Okay.
They likely make. I'm just going off just guesstimating because I'm not sure, but I believe they make somewhere on the order of tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars at that site.
So the cost would be somewhere less than tens of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, yes. Yep.
So just to the point that being made,
well,
I get your second question, but their return on investment, if they had to invest in the fish ladder, that site wouldn't become profitable again for 150 years for them.
Yeah, that's we all get that.
That's the reality of what they're facing.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the cost is for either the state or the town to operate that dam on a yearly basis. That's all.
Well, we can't be sure because we need to find out decide a new version of it that met from a reconstruction perspective the federal requirements and then the operating.
So that's my next question. If there's not hydroelectric power being generated in that dam, does it still have to have a fish passage?
Yes.
According to federal law?
Yes.
Okay, then why wouldn't Glens Falls?
So it wouldn't have to fit. Never mind, I lied. There you go.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So Corey, what do you have to say about that?
Just clarify that one a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
So, Mark isn't completely wrong, but one thing. So, when the federal license leaves, the site then falls under state jurisdiction. The state dam safety group does not require fish passage to occur at these facilities. Now, if you're using federal dollars to do any sort of rehabilitation, then you may have to do fish passage.
Yeah, okay.
Or depending on the permitting requirements for such a rehabilitation. So whenever we do a project on any one of these sites, there's always wetland permitting, shoreline permitting, and as part of that, Army Corps permitting as well, which is another federal agency. We haven't run into fish passage issues at other sites, but I don't want to ever rule it out because if something is big enough and we're doing a project and it has to get permitted through the federal agencies, it could come up. But generally, no.
I guess the question you talked.
Sorry, because the briefings I've received in our conversations, we certainly are going into it being realistic about the fact that if we're able to secure funding, it may come with a fish passage requirement.
All right, another question for Corey, if you don't mind. If the Glens Falls Dam, I think you said if the Glens Falls Dam, if Kelly's Falls gets a fish ladder, then Glens Falls has to get a fish ladder.
Correct.
Okay, so So if Kelly's, if whoever's running Glens Falls starts operating Kelly's dam, do they have to get a fish ladder if they're not doing hydroelectric power?
Technically, no. But,
So why wouldn't they want to go down there, take over that, and not have to put a fish ladder in their dam?
they may ultimately decide to do that.
Okay.
And this is why, you know, we're negotiating on several different fronts. One of the fronts is negotiating with them and trying to figure out all avenues. The other front is trying to figure out how can we sustainably fund this river system, removal of Hadleys, everything else, and achieve the goals of the resource agencies by doing that. And that would be installing a ladder, truck and trap system, whatever you may call it, that satisfies both Kelly's and Greg's so that that operator is in the same position as we just.
When you say achieve the goals of the agencies, what agencies are you talking about?
The federal agencies. So
Okay.
that if we were, say, ever having to do a big rehabilitation project on Kelly's, some structural component or something like that, the federal agencies then aren't trying to implement fish passage because it's already there and taking place.
Okay. I don't want to, I got a few more if you want to hear it. If
We'll get back to you. How's that? You get a second turn. No, let him go. Let him go. Give everybody a chance.
Go ahead.
So my name is Terry Bork. I'm on Shore Drive, right on the river here in Pinardville. We've had a number of eagles on the river in the past 12 or so years. The last I knew, eagles were no longer endangered. They are a protected species. So is there any possibility that because we have adult and fledgling eagles on the waterway here in town, that there might be some type of grant money that could be looked at to help with this process as well?
So the resource agencies that look into, you know, all the species that are affected on these river systems, whether it's the birds, the mammals, the reptiles, the fish, generally it's all coming through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so they're the ones that are requiring the fish passage. So in their minds, it's a higher priority than some of this other stuff. However, they're also the ones that are it's actually through NOAA Fisheries, but they're the ones with the grants out there to implement fish passage. Now, if there was a concern for other habitats out there, then certainly they would probably have opportunities for that as well. As of right now, they're certainly focused on the fisheries here. But as part of this whole process and any permitting that's required for building the fish ladders, repairing the dams, everything else, that's all going to have to go through all the different agency review for how it's going to affect the other species as well.
John Orzechowski, Depot Street, Goffstown. I don't know if you guys realize that these fish ladders, only 3 to 4% of the anadromous fish go up those fish ladders. So 96% of them never go up them, even if you had them. And the fact that if you get 5 fish going through that turbine, 4 of them will survive. Only 1 will be chopped up by the turbine. So some of them get upriver naturally, you know, through the turbine without any fish ladder at all.
So you are correct on the fish ladder efficiency. Amiskeg has a ladder that was built for salmon that has these other fish that we're discussing here tonight have a really difficult time getting through that system because it wasn't designed for that species. This will be designed to directly target these species that we're discussing tonight.
You're still only going to get 3 or 4% of them
Correct.
up there.
Well, the numbers will certainly be higher, but it's the best alternative that we can do to try to satisfy these requirements without removing the dam. Because certainly dam removal is the #1 priority to try to restore these fisheries, and that is what we're really trying to avoid here at Kelly's.
Well, but I live on the Hadley Falls impoundment, and I've lived there for over 45 years. when you take that dam out, it's going to look like the water's only going to be about a foot tall. I've seen it with no water in it. Most people have seen Glen Lake without water in it last fall. You can't take the water out of it. It would be an atrocious mess. It's a big canyon with nothing there.
Well, then that's certainly what we'll be looking at through all the different alternatives analysis to try to figure out the best solution for all these various problems that crop up when a dam is removed.
Okay. Thank you.
Elaine Christian, 18 Trestle Lane, Goffstown. I'm wondering also, like you're looking for funding, what about with parks and recreation? They put all the money into doing the rail trails, or what about charging a fee at the public boat launch area or anything like that that might offset so that people can still enjoy this piece of recreation? I mean, there's 10 miles of rail trail. They keep working on it. And that's a big concern in a lot of communities, that bikes have a place to go. And so they put a lot of money into that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's a great one. One of the things that you've heard a lot about tonight is how do we have enough dollars to do these projects? What's really astounding from my perspective, watching this over the arc of a long career, is how much more expensive things have gotten. In your own houses, if you're building a house, that it's gotten much more expensive. When we talk about dam projects, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars on each one of the dams that we're doing. And whether it's fish pass or restoration or reconstruction or whatever it is, you basically don't get a contractor out of bed in the morning unless you're looking at 7 or 8 zeros. So that is the reality that we're facing. So some of the funding sources that you talked about, yeah, there's possibilities, but those are small dollars. So one of the things that we are going to be recommending is that in 2004, there was a dam commission set up by the legislature. And one of the things, the recommendations that we're going to be moving forward is that we think that the legislature should revisit this issue. We think that it would be a good policy time to talk about this, given that our dams are now 20 years older than they were 20 years ago. They're 20 years in worse shape than they were 20 years ago. And we haven't solved the funding challenges that we even had 20 years ago. So I would hope that maybe that the legislators in the room would maybe think about that, and I'd be happy to provide some alternative language for something like that for any of them. But we think that would be a good option to take up the kinds of ideas you're talking about.
Sorry.
All right.
Michael Allard again, sorry. So those are all good solutions. I know we're working on a lot of stuff for the future. Kelly's Falls, 6 months away. We have 6 months. And the question was asked, how much does it cost to operate the dam? We know that the state's going to be operating the dam in 6 months. And you don't know how much it's going to cost to do that?
We have not done that analysis yet.
Should we get that done soon?
That's something that we'll be looking at.
Thank you, number one. Number two, do we know what it cost I forget the company's name that's doing the storm boards? How much does it cost them to change it? Okay, so $5,000 to change the boards. That's roughly once a year, maybe once every twice a year. And can you get back to us on what the cost is to run the dam, not as a hydro dam?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. I mean, it's complicated because, again, as Corey suggested.
I know, but we have 6 months.
I get that.
I mean, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is years and years and years away. Right. That's great. In 6 months, that operator is going to leave. Those storm boards are going to fail. We're going to lose 3 feet of water. No one's going to be able to put their boat in the water.
Right.
It's 6 months.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to stress is that we haven't been trying to kick this can or anything like that. We found out December of last year that Green Mountain Power was surrendering. Up until December of last year, we were under all assumptions that they were going to renew their license and continue operating for decades to come. As soon as we got that surrender, we immediately contacted them and tried to come up with a solution to keep them on site. Those negotiations fell apart this past June, and therefore we are now looking at trying to negotiate with another hydropower producer. So you are correct, we do need to figure it out, but the best alternative is to get someone else in there to operate that site. It's going to be best.
You're, where are we going here? Right here? Wait a sec, wait, one second. Wait. There we
Roger
go.
Robin, 19 Arrowhead Drive. Given the fact that the fish ladders seem to be the primary reason that all of these small dams are being torn down, isn't there a possibility that since they're pretty silly, pretty ineffective, that we could in fact put a significant amount of money into hiring a decent lawyer to beat FERC back?
So, I think that you all have your due process abilities within the realm of the Constitution and the laws that we uphold. So, I think you should consider whatever actions you think you need to take in that light. In the meantime, we are playing the cards we're dealt. So that's kind of where we sit on that. Yeah.
So here's the bottom line. Hadley's Falls requires a fish ladder and is structurally deficient. So even if you don't worry about the fish ladder, Hadley's Falls is structurally deficient. That the option is going to be rebuild it. Hadley Falls is in dire shape. So that's the reality of that dam. Kelly's Falls, if it's going to keep operating as a hydro, is requiring a fish ladder. Okay, hydro goes away. You don't have to do a fish ladder. If it's decided that we put the money in there to maintain that dam just as an impoundment, it'll stay there, and Greg's won't have to have a fish ladder. These are all potential options, and those will all be laid out in the alternatives. But what our team is trying to do is come up with a way where we are satisfying the federal habitat requirements in a way that we won't, everyone, it's funny, when you have these conversations, you start the conversation, why'd you kick the can so far down the road, $414 million hole, why'd you wait so long? Now we're talking about trying to solve it so in 15 years, people aren't in this room having the exact same conversation about the same dams. The best option is to come up with an alternative, a safe, practical alternative for these three pieces of infrastructure that meet the federal habitat requirements and do the best they can to keep the impoundments where that impact the most amount of property. And that is our number one approach. And if we don't come up with the funding and we don't come up with the ability to do that, we'll go to other alternatives.
One over here.
Hi, Andy Catterick, Goffstown, New Hampshire. So I just wanted to clarify, there's a lot of talk about the fish ladder, and I believe the reason we're pursuing that is because there's grant funding to repair the dam if there's fish passage. If there isn't fish passage, is there grant funding to maintain and repair the dam? And if not, and I guess this would be regards to the Kelly's Falls Dam.
Yes.
If not, who's paying for that and how?
Yeah, that gets to why I apologize for my inaccuracies before, but that is why I said yes, because it gets back to our ability to access the funding. The bottom line is, if you start with the requirement being part of hydro operations, if the hydro operations decide it's not financially viable, when the FERC leaves, it becomes a state. Now, again, the fish passage then isn't a requirement, but it's a reality of what is going to be faced in that passage, a desire from the feds, and any money you're pursuing, it'll be tough to have that conversation if you're not going to meet their goals for the watershed we're talking about. They will be much less interested in giving us any funding if we go to them and say, repair our dam, but not in a way it meets the goals of the federal funding you're talking about. So that's why the solution we're coming up with is trying to meet the needs, because that puts our proposal and the application we're moving forward in a much better light and a much more realistic option of being able to then end up with two pieces of infrastructure that are there and keeping the impoundments and the watersheds as they are today.
We got numerous people that haven't had a chance to ask a question yet.
Hey, I'm Chris Nadeau, 17 Sunny Ave in Goffstown. So you're talking about obviously in 6 months, and before you had mentioned that you had recommended that the Lake Association or some association works with the state to contract out the cost for, fixing the boards. Can we work with you guys so we can be the ones to let Baycroft or whatever agency it is to know when to come out, but the state pays the bill? Because it's $5,000 a shot. We've,
Yeah.
our dam, every dam's put money in. It's not much money. It's $10,000 a year, maybe.
So no, we can certainly talk about that, but I guess just being as straight with you guys as you guys are being with us, there are lake associations that pay those fees. This is extremely important to all of you, right? You're here in this room. Figure out within your lake association ways to pay for some of these lower dollar needs. There are lake associations across the state that do that, so they have more control and ability to keep their lake in the conditions that are most desirable to them.
Thank you, Select Board Vice Chair. Hi, thank you all for coming again. My name's Marie Morgan. I do not live on the lake. But as some of the folks have already said, and you mentioned it, having a committee. And I saw a while back that the Exeter had a committee for 10 years and then didn't make any difference. The dam still was removed. A big difference there is they don't have 300 homes below that dam.
Another big difference was that was a town-owned dam.
Okay, good to know.
So that was a town-owned dam, and the town made the choice. It wasn't financially viable to rebuild it, and they came up with an option for a type of impoundment that was lower than a dam and to do the best they could. But that was a decision they came up with as a community.
Thank you.
For a piece of property infrastructure they owned.
So the question I really wanted to know is, I would think if the town had a committee or a handful of people who could work and meet with Corey occasionally to get more of this information, like the rules, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife rules, the contact people, and also to think outside the box.
We've made that suggestion.
Okay, for example, we have a New Hampshire Department of Transportation.
Yep.
And what do? They fix our state roads.
Sure.
So is it possible? Question. All right. I'm sorry. I'm just saying, thinking outside the box. Is it possible for the state to have a dam bureau with people who fix the dams? I don't know. Maybe it would cost a fortune. Another thing.
Wait, ma'am. We do, but it requires funding to do that. So we manage numerous capital projects that involve fixing the dams, but you have to have funding to do that.
And one of the other issues you've all repeated several times is you don't have a large staff. So again, working with town people on a committee, not only maybe in Goffstown, but some other towns where you're thinking about removing the dams, maybe these people can help research on several different levels. And that was my only suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
The gentleman in the back's been waiting a long time.
He's used to waiting.
Yes.
It's not me.
Brian Mazer from 39 Shirley Park Road. I just have a quick question. Is there a working definition, or how do you guys categorize the different statuses of the dams?
You mean the condition?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey Corey, why don't you answer that one?
Is that published anywhere?
Yeah, so if you go onto the DES website under Dam Bureau, you're going to find all our rules and regulations in the dam safety section, and that defines what a high hazard dam is, what a significant hazard dam and a low hazard dam, along with different condition criteria, such as if it's in poor condition, satisfactory condition, and so on and so forth. So all that is laid out on the website.
So a follow-up to that, so I'm on Greg Falls, but Glen Lake, and there was repairs done last fall. So if it's high hazard, how did that repairs affect the status of the condition of the dam?
I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. I don't know what exactly it's a high hazard dam regardless of its condition. You could build a brand new dam there today and it's still going to be a high hazard dam, because if that brand new dam failed, there'd be loss of life. So you can have a perfectly fine high hazard dam or one in disrepair. There are condition criteria associated with that, and I don't know what that is, because one thing that happens, and we've discussed it a couple times, but since it's regulated by FERC, their condition criteria is a little different than the state dam safety section's criteria.
Yeah, so just to make sure you understood, we're talking two different categories of descriptions. The high hazard has nothing to do with condition. It's about, high hazard means if the dam fails, there'd be loss of life. So even a dam that's brand new and in perfect condition could still be a high hazard dam, because if it failed, it resulted in loss of life. And then you're talking about the rankings and its categories based on condition, which there's a federal standard and a state standard.
Mark, you mentioned a few times about state reps. You had numerous ones here.
Oh, yeah.
And Joe wanted to speak.
My good friend Joe.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, DES, for coming. I guess my question is, we had a budget process. Budget just got signed into law in June. My question is, did DES come to the legislature with a request of $414 million to fix the high hazard dams in the state?
No, because every one of the people on the stage would have been fired by the governor.
Okay.
So, no, we came forward with as realistic a budget as we could. That, and Joe, the process is every agency works with the governor for the governor to put forward a budget. Then that budget gets debated by the House. The House sends it over to the Senate. Then there are negotiations between all three for both the operating budget and the capital budget. I think I think the representative knows we would not have been able to get a $414 million appropriation in HB 25. Now, what we do want to do, and this gets back to what Ted was talking about earlier, is, and I'm, you, some of the folks we're going to come to, and Representative Harrington is very interested in this as well. What we want to bring to you guys is, let's replicate the commission that in 2004, which created a recommendation. And if you look at the 2004 report that came out of that commission, a number of those recommendations would actually still be good recommendations to follow today. So a relook at it, and then a look at new recommendations that might come from it. And what we're hoping.
Okay, Mark, my last point is.
Let me real quick, because it gets to your point. What we're hoping is that conversation will start to populate more effectively among the state reps and state senators the needs that are there. So in the next budget, it can be talked about.
That sounds great. We file legislation in 2 weeks. I look forward to working with DES if you need it.
We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I don't need an answer. I need just questions. Think about this generation. Thank you.
Somebody's going to speak, and you can go later.
Hi, Andy Kazakis, 5 Arrowhead Drive in Goffstown.
Corey, you started to touch on this a little bit, but can you kind of go into more incentives that's being made to Eagle Creek to take the dam over? Again, you started to touch on it a little bit, but
You mean take over Kelly Falls?
Kelly Falls, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So certainly, I think the best scenario for any operator at Greg's is to also operate Kelly's. That's the best solution because they control both. We have one lease with them, and so we are trying to work with them as far as trying to build a lease that works. One thing I mentioned earlier was, they're investing in capital projects on site that they're required to do as part of that lease out of their own pocket, such as, the roof, the spillway assessments, like everything that you saw that was done last year with the drawdown and all that was all paid for Eagle Creek. Now, obviously, them rehabilitating that spillway is a benefit to the state. So we need to work with them to make sure that the leases actively show that. And so that's some of the incentives that we are hoping to put forth to try to make this all work.
So, again, I don't want Corey to undersell what they're doing. They're trying to figure out a way to tap into federal dollars so that we can keep a piece of infrastructure that remains the impoundment at Kelly's, and we can have an operator happy and who has a good, a profitable operation down at Greg's and satisfy the habitat needs of the thruway. That is how we could access the most amount of federal dollars, and it's how we could have the best possible outcome from both the needs of the folks in this room, the needs of the species that are in there, and the operator's ability to run a for-profit operation at Greg's. And that's the key to the package we're trying to put together.
Does a homeowners association help with the federal funds? And I say that in regards to, and it's not going to be a popular statement, but there's 280 people on both lakes. If you, again, excuse me, because you're going to be mad, but if you all contribute $200 a month to your homeowners association, it's $2,400 a year. It's over $500,000 a year in total, just out of the homeowners association. What does that do to the federal funds? Does that make them happier to want to contribute?
Yeah, I mean,
that just seems to be kind of not talked about right here.
Yeah, and so let me respond this way. There are a lot of other bodies of water that have decided that a dam is a key part to the condition of the lakes that they want, that the folks who are the most directly impacted take on some, if not all, of the responsibility of keeping the conditions the way they want them. And it certainly is a better story to tell when you're seeking funding that the folks most impacted are contributing at some level to being to keeping the lake and the piece of water in the condition and the characteristics they're interested in it staying.
Hi, Josh Dakotas from Russell Ave, Goffstown. Question for Corey. What is the state of the structure of Kelly Falls Dam? Do we know that? Like, structurally, is it still? Yeah, the condition of it.
As of right now, we don't know of any structural deficiencies associated with that structure. Once again, it's a 100-year-old structure, so at some point in time, if things are looked at differently, then they might find some deficiencies. But as of right now, it's okay.
And that's why, up until they found out they were going to have a fish passage requirement, they were going to renew their lease. But so again, this is like so for them to continue to operate, they would need to do a fish ladder. So that's why they have to walk away from it, and then we have to figure out what to do with it if it's state controlled.
Hi, my name is Barbara Charette, and I live in Manchester. Our property actually abuts the Piscataquog River Park, which is the Piscataquog River, and we live downstream from the Kelly Falls. And you mentioned before that it was a potential high hazard, that would be high possibility of loss of life, which I assume would be everybody that lives downstream from the Kelly Street Falls. So, and I also understand that the falls themselves, where the dam is actually within the city of Manchester. They own the property, the boat ramp, and all that property around the dam. Have you been in talks with the city of Manchester at all about this? Have there been any discussion, or do they have a dam commission? Because it would directly affect the residents who live downstream.
So we've certainly made, we've made all the officials aware of the situation we find ourselves with these pieces of infrastructure. And again, that's why we want to do this we want to redo the 2004 commission, because we're hoping it'll draw more attention to this issue from both local elected officials and all the communities impacted and the state legislature.
So what you're saying is you've notified Manchester, but you haven't got a response from anybody in the government?
Well, they're aware that, it's not, in fairness to Manchester, it's not a municipally owned dam. It's a state-owned dam, so we're responsible for it. The local officials are aware of the situation, but, let me take a totally different thing than dam. Let's pretend we're talking about wastewater. The challenge with these conversations is when you go to the community and they need a piece of infrastructure, a utility, we talk about cost and we look for all the ways to pay for it. And then if we can't find any other dollars out there, then the community says, how important it was to them, until it then becomes the responsibility of the community to pay for it. So we are going to do our best to find the funding to protect these pieces of infrastructure and to protect these waters that have been created that now are extremely valuable and important to many people in these communities. But, like I said, other folks in other parts of the state, when it got to this point, have decided to say, we're the ones impacted, we need to take this on. So we'll do the best we can, and with the sources of funding we have, and we'll be transparent with you about what that is. We have been, the last 3 months, there has been plenty of discussion among all the folks in these communities about the situation with these pieces of infrastructure. So right now, I'm sure Manchester, who has a ton of needs and a ton of, more needs than funding at the city level, is waiting to see what they do, since this right now isn't their responsibility. Whichever order you want to go. Perfect.
Engineering question for Corey. But if I just take 30 seconds, there was a comment on the audience about could money be diverted from our town's park department that is being spent on the rail trail? Could it be diverted to the dam? I am the face and the name, Dave Pierce, Goffstown. I'm the face and the name responsible for the rail trail. And it's the only tax money spent on that trail was in 2004 on a tax article. And for example, this year, the project I built was 100% funded by private donations. Corey, behind a dam is considerable silt that's built up over 100 years. When a dam is removed, do you take any engineering steps to redefine the stream channel and all that silt that's been impounded?
Yep. Yeah, we certainly do. And so one of the things you'll see the engineering consultants out there doing is they're going to basically be doing a survey of how much sediment is behind Hadley Falls Dam, what are the contours of the bedrock behind Hadley Falls Dam. Is there, when we remove the dam, are we also going to have to be removing sediment? And if so, what is the extent of that?
Hi, Amy Kozlowski, 84 Lynchville Park Road, Goffstown. Just a quick question. How much does it take to deconstruct a dam?
So in this case, we're looking at Hadley Falls, probably it's going to be multi-millions of dollars, probably somewhere in that order, less than 5 million, I would assume, but not sure on any of those numbers. However, one thing I do want to mention, rebuilding that dam, because it's structurally deficient, and the only recourse to fix that is to actually anchor it to the bedrock. But because the concrete is so old and so deficient, that likely cannot take place. So therefore, in order to, if you were to look at rehabilitating that dam, you would actually have to first remove it before actually constructing a brand new dam in its place.
Okay.
And just another quick point on that, from a safety, not doing anything at Hadley's is not an option. So there is going to be a cost associated with removal. It still might be the least expensive option while still meeting our first and foremost responsibility, which is public safety. And as Corey mentioned, the same cost would most likely be part of any rehabilitation of it anyways.
Okay, and my second question is, as of the 61 hazardous dams in New Hampshire, we're meeting all here today because we have a lot of interest in keeping our dams and keeping our water. What are the other 58 other communities? Do they have people using those waters north of those dams? And where are we in the whole grand scheme of the other 58 dams?
So remember, high hazard doesn't mean it's in bad condition. High hazard means it's a dam that if it fails would result in the loss of life. So high hazard, the reason we're concentrating on high hazard is two. It makes up about 300 million of the capital needs of the 414 are within those 61. And they're the highest priority from a public safety perspective. Now, to answer your question, Corey and the Dam Bureau are in the process of a review of all 275 dams and taking a look at each dam and in multiple categories. Original purpose versus current use. Condition. Is it where it falls in the hazard from a public safety perspective? Its current needs. So we are in the process, and so a dam will fall. It's hard to have just one categories of these because you may have when you have a list of ones in poor condition, those won't necessarily, they won't be all high hazard dams or not high hazard dams. So the challenge with an overall analysis is each dam is going to fall into a different category depending on which one of the categories you're talking about. So that's why what we're trying to bring forward is the overall needs of the entire system, where those, and categorizing them from a perspective of a public safety perspective and a perspective of purpose and the public interest that is results from those dams. All right.
Thank you. Pete Dearness, New Boston Road. Are we still going to have a meeting before January 1 to look at what the town can do with respect to Hadley Falls?
So with the agreement, with concurrence from the Board of Selectmen, our next step as it comes to Hadley Falls is to do the analysis that's needed, the alternatives analysis that's needed to come up with the options and the estimated cost associated with those. So we will do that as quickly as possible, but making sure we're doing it in a way that produces solid information and solid backed alternatives, and then we will bring those forward for everyone to look at of what alternatives and their costs associated. So I don't want to give a date. You know, and the gentleman, I understand where he was coming from, saying April 1st, that's coming up. We totally get it, but we want to make sure we are looking at the options and getting good data and getting a good understanding of what's needed for all of these before we bring that before you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Catherine Prescasa. My husband and I have been residents of Goffstown for over 35 years, and I'm an architect, and I served on the Village Planning Commission back when this report here was written, talking about the goals of what our village should be. And we looked at economic impact, we looked at architectural impact, we looked at community impact, we looked at recreational impact. And one of the things that was key in setting the character of our town, there was the village and the lake there as you go across the bridge. And we have encouraged the pumpkin regatta and all of those things. And really we felt that was the defining character of what Goffstown is. And that is created by Hadley Falls. So we need to really understand that that is the character of Goffstown, and that's when people think of Goffstown, they think of Glen Lake, Mount Canunek, and the waterways through the environment. And also, Mark, you mentioned the logo for Exeter, had the alewife on it. I encourage you to look at our logo. We also have a dam, and we have water, and a lake and a mountain in our logo. So it's really, really important, and it has been for the history of our town. So thank you for reaching out to us.
But I appreciate that, but it has to be paid for. So if it's that valuable to the town, is the town willing to pay for it? So, I mean, something is only as valuable as it and is worth as much people are willing to pay for it.
What was the income from all these dams?
So, Hadley Falls hasn't had an operator since 2007.
I know that one,
We said, yeah, so as we said earlier, last year, do you mean the income to the state from the lease? Yeah, so we got 7,000 from Kelly's, and we got about 200,000 from Greg's, which went back in to the dam maintenance fund.
Hi, my name is Edna Paradise. I live at 40 Coast Street in Penardville, or Goffstown, Lynchville Park. Two things. The first is I read an article in the Union Leader not that long ago that the state, I believe it is, would be fined $20,000 a month if the fish ladders weren't done by a certain date. Now, I don't know about that too much, but the second part of this is if we do have somebody running the Kelly's Falls Dam, then we will need to build the fish ladders. And since it was mentioned here tonight that if the Piscataquog River is top priority in New England, shouldn't this river get the priority of the money that needs to be?
The fine was actually per day, and it was going to be the result of the state not responding to FERC about our plans for Hadley Falls. So that was the fine you're talking about. And you know, in fairness to the federal government, after 16 years, they said, you got to tell us what you're doing with this. You've held on an inactive license for 16 years. What are you going to do with it? So, and to the point where it got to the point where they were going to utilize one of the tools, which is fining for not being responsive. So that is why that was part of, and we appreciate the understanding and cooperation from the town of understanding why we had to say, we have to give up this license now. We don't have the ability to hold on to it, but we want to work with you moving forward. To the other question, that, again, a little bit of a broken record here, but that gets back to the point, they're only going to give us the money when they're saying they've identified as one of the most important in the Northeast. What they mean by that is from the species and the habitat that's of concern to those agencies. So they're only going to be willing to put in funding that meets the goal of their goals as an agency, which is the fish ladder and the movement of these species. So that's what they're telling us. They're saying, you are that is an important water body from us from a habitat perspective. And if you can bring forward plans that meet the needs of the species, in our opinion, we're willing to help you out financially. Now, their hands are tied with being able to help for-profit dams. They're not able to do that. And again, that gets back to one of the things we're going to ask our congressional delegation to point out as an inconsistency in federal policy. But that being said, where we are now is, so that's why they're all linked together in, okay, they can demand a fish passage when there is an operator, but they can't put money towards it to help the operator. So the operator has to make a decision. Then the fish ladder is no longer needed. But if we're going to get the funding needed to maintain and rehabilitate these dams, we need to do it in a way that meets those needs.
We got a question back here.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Dick Bruno. I live on High Street in Goffstown. We talked a lot about fish tonight, and you mentioned infrastructure. I'm more concerned about the economic impact on the town. So my question to you is, number one, where is the federal infrastructure funds that we hear about? Mm-hmm. And can't we tap into some of that money, not just saying for the waterway, but it's an impact on our town, it's an impact on our citizens. And I understand infrastructure means what makes a town and cities more healthy. And this is an argument that I don't know if you've heard it made before, but I think it should be made. And not just to focus, I understand all about the fish ladders, but there's a lot of people in here that are impacted, and our town is impacted economically. So can we make that case?
Yeah, do you know why we're concentrating on the fish? Because that's where the money is. The federal dollars you're talking about are for that. So,
for the fish.
That's why it matters. There isn't a pot of funding saying this dam helps us put on a festival every year. The federal dollars you're talking about that have been discussed are for the purposes we have been discussing tonight. So that is why the fish matter so much. That is the tap into the federal dollars.
But I don't mean to hold you up, but infrastructure, I'm talking about the infrastructure funds. It can't be just for fish,
the dam
waterway.
infrastructure funding that was made available are for the purposes we've been talking about tonight.
Okay, all right, well.
There you go. You got your answer.
Very much.
I mean, as I told you at the beginning of the meeting, I'm going to give you the true answers, even if you don't like. There isn't dam money just to fix dams. Or the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The money that has been invested through those stimulus packages and the infrastructure packages are all the sources of funding we've been talking about all night. So there isn't that pot of funding you're talking about.
Hello, Andy again.
Believe me, that would have been the first one we went to.
I just want to make one point with regards to the Hadley Falls Dam. There is an electric operator willing to put a generator and operate electricity at the dam. There was issues with negotiating the lease, and I think what they don't want to do is pay for the repairs of the dam that is owned by the state. Just so people know.
Well, and that one, again, to continue operating under a FERC license, would have needed a fish ladder. So that was believe me, they weren't willing to pay a couple $100,000. They certainly weren't willing to pay the couple million it would have taken to do that. So it's the same situation that you were running into with Kelly Falls. The required infrastructure improvements that would have been needed by FERC would have made it cost ineffective. Granite Shore Power would have stayed if they hadn't had to do the fish ladder. They were willing to. So that's what changes the dynamic.
So to help answer your question, yes, we were working with the owner of the powerhouse, SMC, that is doing the whole development over there. However, you're correct. They weren't willing to pay for the upgrades to the dam necessary for the hydropower to be produced. Right. And so that was the conundrum, because obviously down at Greg's and at Kelly's, those hydropower producers pay for infrastructure upgrades and maintenance and operation of those dams as part of their ongoing operations and as part of that lease agreement. SMC was not willing to do that. They were not willing to upgrade the dam, nor were they willing to pay for the operations of the site anyways. So the state of New Hampshire would have been investing for a private entity to make money. And all these leases that we negotiate have to go through all governor and council and legal review. And essentially the agreement wouldn't have even reached that process. So
for different reasons, both dams were in the same place. The amount of money needed to put into it made it not a profitable venture. I mean, huh?
That's why it's been like that for 16 years.
That's why that one's been that for 16 years. And Kelly's, it was a different scenario until they'd have to build the fish ladder. So, but the basic premise is the same. The investment that would need to be made would have made the return on investment not viable for an operator to operate either of them. Different reasons, different history, different conditions, but same basic story. We have two dams that, in order to continue operating, require a lot of investment that make operating, and based on the amount of electricity that's produced, not a profitable venture.
We have a question over here, Jack.
I have a statement, not a question. It's to the people out there who aren't on the lake and think that this doesn't impact them, that when the town loses the revenue from the premium lot taxes of the properties on the lake, that cost is going to be spread out through the rest of the town, not just a loss to the lake owners.
Yeah, I want to talk to the people and the people in this room. I hope you heard everything we've talked about tonight is how do we keep the infrastructure, the Kelly Dam's infrastructure there and Greg's Falls infrastructure there. We are not here talking about how we want to tear down 3 dams. That we haven't said that, and that's not what we've even implied. Here's what we've implied. Greg's Falls has an operator that has given zero indication they want to walk away, because right now it is a profitable venture for them. We have an old, high hazard, in a very bad condition dam that hasn't been able to have an operator since 2007, and would most likely have to be totally removed to put something new there anyways. And you have another piece of dam that is in fairly good condition, but the federal requirements for it to continue to operate as an electric make it not viable. But there's federal funding available that we may be able to do the things that interest the federal government and would be a benefit to Greg's by making sure the fish passage needs are met there, and Greg's can continue to operate in a way that they're meeting their federal requirements. So if just, laying all cards on the table, we want to get to a situation where Hadley Falls, it is a real challenge that there's going to be any financial option where that you have a dam there long-term in the next, 10 plus years. That is just a reality. We haven't made any decisions. There have been no policy decisions made, but just giving you the straight scoop, that it is a tough situation. We feel pretty good that we think there can be an option where the other two pieces of infrastructure are there and they're operated in a way where we're limiting the state's exposure. You have an operator who's being able to run a profitable venture, and you have two pieces of infrastructure that meet the federal requirements and the needs they've expressed and are keeping the characteristics of the watersheds that are created by those two dams. That's what we're working towards.
I have a question personally. And Tim sat there all night, nice and quiet, and hasn't been
You mean
involved.
Dan?
Dan, I'm sorry. What's involved in the dam maintenance? If you don't have an operator, if you don't have an operator, what's involved in maintaining that dam from the state's point of view?
Well, there's always the same safety issues you always have. So, there's inspections. There's if there's any kind of problems with the masonry, we have a construction crew that does repairs on that. We have excavators and all that kind of thing.
The boards they talked about earlier.
The boards, they would have to work on the boards too. So there's the cost of doing that. And the problem really is for us, we really have an issue with the manpower issue. We have 5 dam operators now for the over 200 dams across the state. One's up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. He never goes south of Old Man of the Mountain, so that leaves 4 down here. One handles Winnipesaukee, Newfound, Winnisquam, that area, just those major dams. That leaves 3 guys left to do all the rest of the work. So when we have flashboards go down across the state, it takes a long time for them to get places. And there's a cost involved in that. There's a labor cost involved, and there's a time issue too. So for us, it's a real problem in terms of getting to all these dams as fast as people would like them to. And this one's going to be a real problem if we can't find some way, like Corey was mentioning, of getting water going through where the turbines are, because we can't get the water down, we can't get out there on the dam itself and do the repairs. So there's...
And as the only non-engineer on this stage, I think it still makes just straight common sense that if there's no longer an operator there and we just do the absolute bare minimum, it's eventually going to be a poor condition, and you're just kicking the can down the road of a problem you're eventually going to have there, because you'll hit a. I mean that's Hadley's. Part of it not having had an operator for 16 years is so you want to know from a dam maintenance what happens. You've got right in your downtown an example. All right, it's I don't want to cut it off. So we'll stay till 1:15. 10 more minutes.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Sebastian, 133 Moose Club Park Road. I guess just a couple quick, easy questions, I hope. The first one is have you considered, I know this is a lot of money for the state to have to try to come up with to repair these dams, but it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, wouldn't it be a lot of money when everybody's property value goes down and there's 60 houses on my road alone that says I have beach access in my deed? Probably going to be some lawsuits, I would imagine. Probably a lot of lawsuits for a lot of money, because it's to no action of the property owners that have caused this. Bought this house in good faith. It says in my deed, beach access.
I don't mean to sound heartless, but just you're talking about it from a lawsuit perspective.
I'm just a question.
No. I just you bought people bought property on an artificially created piece of water. So and you're absolutely right. If the dams go away and the watersheds that have been created go away, there's going to be a bunch of negative impacts, some of them are economic. The challenge is linking those two economics, linking, like right now, all the money you're talking about being created, none of that goes to the maintenance or repair of the dams. So they're connected, but they're not locked together. So all those other things are created without an investment into the piece of infrastructure that creates the conditions for it. So that's why it was a great system when there was a for-profit reason to maintain and operate these dams. So there was interest for the dams, and the other benefits created from it are great. What we're facing is when it is no longer profitable for someone to operate that, and the source of funding that came to maintain and repair these dams go away, there's no source of money to take care of the piece of infrastructure, regardless of all those other economic conditions that are created on the side.
Well, I just don't think you're really considering, you're kicking the can down the road again, because you're talking $450 million worth of infrastructure spending that you don't want to make, and potentially you got hundreds of millions of dollars of lawsuit that the state, and I'm not trying to threaten or anything.
We wouldn't lose those were properties bought based on the conditions that exist, and that is not high on the list of concerns. No offense, but we don't have the funding to take care of them. That's the issue in front of us.
No, as far as these hydroelectric plants and everything else, there's a New Hampshire green energy tax, which affects green energy producers as much as non-green energy producers, which doesn't it keeps green energy producers from investing in our state. And some of these, the windmills, the hydroelectric dams, stuff like that, it doesn't make it worth them to put the hydroelectric dams in or to operate the hydroelectric, because the state charges them so much money because these green energy taxes or fees. If I'm not saying it right, it's something.
I understand. I appreciate where you're coming from. What we're facing in front of us is infrastructure that have financial needs that we don't have a source of. And I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just, the issues you're discussing, don't get to that heart of there's no money to take care of this, so we're trying to find the money to take care of this.
I got one over here.
Well, let's see. How many people want to ask a question that hasn't already been asked? I do. All right, so we got two. I see this gentleman and this young lady, and I think we're going to call it a night at that point. We'll go ladies first, sir.
Thank you. And thank you guys for showing up and helping us get educated, because it sounds like there's a lot of data. So my background is data science, and the way that we solve problems is something called total cost of ownership. So you guys have a slice and a perspective with your numbers, and Goffstown has a slice and a perspective of our numbers and the concerns. And what we need is a total cost of ownership analysis of this dam situation. Now, I'm perfectly capable of collecting the data side on the Goffstown because my husband is a selectman, but can I have access to Corey or someone to get the true data? Because you guys might lose your jobs if it goes up, but we need to push this up and be able to create a total set of numbers so that we make decisions that affect the greatest good.
Yeah.
And so that's the conversation that I think we're not having tonight. And all I'm asking you is, if you will give us total transparency with those numbers, we can add our numbers, and at least we can look at this from a larger perspective than fish or the state budget or Goffstown. But we need one story that does do greater good, and we're not having that discussion tonight. And that's frustrating.
So with Hadley Falls, the alternatives analysis will set out a series of alternatives and the estimated cost associated with them, and then everyone will be able to decide, you know, that's what it costs, what are the options, and what are the funding sources. No, I'm telling you that ma'am, the numbers will come from that study. I don't know what other numbers you're looking for.
I am thinking about a lot more numbers. I'm thinking about property tax on our side. I'm thinking about the revenue from the dams, as you were talking about. I'm talking about how much money has been put into maintenance. I mean, there's a lot more pieces to this that I think if we had the big perspective, we could sit down and actually on our side represent Goffstown better and be more fair to the state.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need any numbers from us to do what you're talking about. And because
But as long as I can talk to Corey, I'm fine with it. I just think that as a group, we need to look at this.
yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. The town should be figuring out the costs and benefits of these infrastructure from the town's perspective. Absolutely, you should be doing that. But you don't need any numbers from us to do that. What we'll be able to tell you is what the approximate costs are for the various options for the infrastructure down the line. Everything you're talking about are numbers you can work with the town to get. Yeah, we don't have any of those numbers you're talking about. No.
All right. So when Kelly Falls goes without an operator and you can get possible access to federal funding, put in a fish ladder.
Becomes eligible. Yep.
Becomes eligible, apply, granted, fish ladder. Would there be a moratorium on a new operator coming in, or could a new operator then take that dam over and operate it as a profitable entity?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And there's no clear answer on that.
Yeah.
There are thoughts out there that could occur. So, yeah, the license goes away. We as the state install everything, get it all up. Someone then comes in, starts a new FERC license, starts a new lease, and starts operating there again. So, yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of, and that's just the paperwork end of things. That's not.
It would cost about $1 million to go from the licensing process. And really, Corey, tell me if I'm wrong again, but really it would be up to FERC working, you know, that FERC is who would evaluate the license application, and then it would really be up to FERC and talking to their sister federal agencies. We made this investment, but now someone wants to come and operate. It has the fish ladder we were looking for. So it would really be, it's a federal license. So it would really be up to the feds to decide if they're okay that 5 years ago they made this investment and now 5 years later the hydro market changes, the dynamics are different, it's more viable, and so on come in. So really it would ultimately be a FERC working with its sister agencies, federal agencies, to make that decision. But, you know, in a way, we kind of don't want to go down that path too far because, there's the adage, don't ask a question you're not sure you want the answer to. So right now we know that there is an interest for an operator now. Can we come up with a dynamic where we end up with two pieces of infrastructure that are there, that are in good condition, meet the habitat needs, and then continue to provide the benefit, and you have one operating in an effective for-profit for an operator. All right, 8:45, what do you think?
All right, that'll conclude tonight's meeting. We want to thank everybody from the DES for coming out and putting up with us, answering all the questions. And thank you, and I know we'll probably do this again down the road.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's time.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and you obviously have our contact information on the front of that handout, so.